Hey, welcome back. We're continuing our study of Monkey by Wu Cheng-en, and in this episode we're going to look at chapters 19 through 21, which is the first real episode on their journey. I mentioned before about how Arthur Waley took the 100-chapter journey to the West and trimmed it down to 30 chapters. And mostly the way he did that was to remove episodes from the journey. We'll talk a little bit more about the episodic quality of the journey next time. Last time, we also talked about character, and how the characters, Monkey, Pigsy, Sandy, Tripitaka, the Dragon Horse, have lots of symbolic characteristics. And one could even read the story Journey to the West as an allegory, perhaps even a spiritual allegory. I wanted to mention one more aspect of symbolism, and that is archetype. Archetypes are symbols that are universally held, as opposed to symbols that are purely cultural. Now, within Journey to the West, there are clearly several symbols that are very culturally connected. Pigsy's appetite is clearly associated with the religion of Buddhism, as a counterpoint to the Buddhist detachment from desire. But as we talked about heroes' journeys, archetypes are also figures that tend to show up no matter the history or culture or time of the piece. A hero on a journey is an archetype, and a hero on a spiritual journey is also an archetype. And it's interesting to see how much of the symbolism within each of these characters is archetypal, and how much is cultural. In any case, in this particular episode, we also have a lot of fun interactions between our characters. These characters are all on a journey together, and when you travel together long enough with a mismatched group of friends, there are tensions that come out, as well as some good-natured pranking. In this particular episode, both Monkey and Pigsy prank each other multiple times. Pigsy manages to get Monkey 2 headaches, and Monkey manages to get Pigsy to do a whole lot of extra work. There's also this fantastic sequence where Monkey needs to make sure that Pigsy stays busy while he's going on an errand, and so he tells Pigsy to be a mourner over a dead body, which Monkey plans to revive in just a few minutes. And he tells Pigsy, "None of this dry-eyed crying, you're not gonna fake cry for me." And so Pigsy sticks his fingers in his nose and pinches his nose to make his eyes water. And he begins to weep and wail, and Monkey says, "Oh, that's great, that's perfect." The fact that these characters are constantly joking around with each other and kind of ribbing each other, how does that influence how seriously we take the spiritual journey that they're on? It's an interesting question, and well worth examining. I also want to come back to the ideas of the three big religious philosophies, Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, which all show up in this section. But also look at the way they sometimes seem to have tensions with each other. I'll come back to that in just a moment. Our episode begins with Tripitaka, who is resting in a temple in the midst of their journey, when, as he is nearly falling asleep, in comes a ghost. Ooh! It's the ghost of the Emperor of Crowcock, who was killed by an evil magician. Tripitaka asks lots of questions, wondering what the ghost wants with him. It turns out that the ghost both wants to tell his story and also ask for help from Tripitaka, because he knows who Tripitaka is, and he also knows that Tripitaka's disciple Monkey is very good at fighting monsters. His story goes like this. His country was experiencing a drought, and he did everything he could to try to make things better. And along came a Taoist magician, who then brought rain. And so the kingdom was spared from the devastation of the drought, and the emperor and the magician were very close and enjoyed each other's company for a while. And then one day, as they were walking in a garden, the magician shoved the emperor into a well, and transformed himself into the likeness of the emperor, and then went on ruling. So the kingdom hasn't realized that their emperor's been dead for 3 years. Tripitaka wonders about what to do about this. He realizes that he should send Monkey to beat this magician, but also he's a little bit concerned. Since the magician looks like the emperor, it might look like Tripitaka and his disciples are just coming in and killing the emperor, instead of killing the imposter who's taking the emperor's form. And so the ghost emperor says, "Well, talk to my son, the prince, and he'll help you out." So Tripitaka tells all of his disciples about this, and it turns out that they've had similar hints of things to come. And so he sends Monkey to go find the prince. Now the prince is on a hunting party right now. And so Monkey transforms himself into a rabbit. Poof! And when the prince sees the rabbit, he shoots an arrow. And Monkey, being super magical, catches the arrow instead of being hit by the arrow, and runs away. And the prince thinks that he has hit the rabbit, and so he pursues after it. And he chases it, and he chases it, and Monkey keeps leading him on, never getting too far ahead or too close, until he finally arrives at the temple. When the prince arrives at the temple, he looks around, and he sees his arrow stuck into the wood of the temple, and he's very confused. But he recognizes the temple as a place that his father had given money to a long time ago, and so he decides to go inside. He comes inside and all of the priests recognize him, but there's one priest who doesn't bow down when he comes in. It's Tripitaka. And the prince is very angry, and he challenges Tripitaka, and they have a little battle of words for a moment, before Monkey pops out of a box and says that he is a magical oracle who can tell things that have happened 500 years ago up to 500 years from now. And he hints that the prince has not avenged his father. The prince is very confused, and takes a few minutes to take this in, when they finally explain to him that his father has been killed by a magician, and the magician has usurped the throne. They also show him evidence that the ghost left, the jade tablet. The prince then sneaks on home and speaks to his mother, something he hasn't done in 3 years because the magician has forbade it. The two of them discover that this is true, and so they throw their support to Tripitaka. Meanwhile, that evening, Monkey comes up with another idea. See, he's going to have to face all the officials of the court, and if he doesn't have more proof to back his story, there might be a big fight scene in which he hurts people. And so, he wakes up Pigsy. Oh. And he tells Pigsy that they're going on a treasure hunt. And so Pigsy follows him until they come to the well. And Monkey shoves Pigsy into the well and asks him to get the treasure at the bottom of the well, saying that he can keep whatever treasure he finds. Pigsy finds the dragon of the well, who then gives him the corpse of the emperor, which is still in perfect shape because the dragon at the bottom of the well preserved it. But this isn't a treasure, and Pigsy's pretty miffed about it. But Monkey insists that Pigsy pull up the corpse before he will help him out of the well. And so finally, Pigsy does. And up he comes with the body of the emperor. The two of them then return to the temple, and Pigsy thinks, that was a dirty trick that Monkey played on me. I'm gonna get him back. And so he decides to tell Tripitaka that Monkey can resuscitate the emperor. And if Monkey doesn't, that Tripitaka should give him a headache with the headache spell. And so when they return, they show the body, and Monkey plans to use it as evidence to save them when they face the magician. But when Pigsy tells Tripitaka to give him a headache if he doesn't revive it, Tripitaka complies, and Monkey gets a horrible headache. Finally, Monkey says, fine, I'll go find a way to bring him back to life. And so he flies up to Lao Tzu. Remember the father of Taoism up there in heaven? And he asks of Lao Tzu 1,000 pills of elixir to resuscitate the emperor. He really only needs one, but he likes to mess with Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu will not have it, and says, no, I'm not going to give you anything. But then he thinks the better of it, realizing that Monkey will probably cause a lot of mischief if he is completely forbidden. And so he gives him one single pill. Monkey then takes that back, and they revive the emperor. Monkey has to give him mouth-to-mouth. Pigsy can't, because his breath is bad, because he used to eat people. The emperor is alive again. Oh, thank you, and he decides that he will go with them to the west. But the disciples say, no, it's fine, we're going to reinstate you as an emperor, no problem. The next day they present themselves at the court, and the emperor looks like just one more disciple. But after presenting themselves, Monkey challenges the magician, saying that he's an imposter. And then they fly up into the air and fight. Quickly, the magician realizes that he's easily outmatched by Monkey, and so he decides to play another trick. And he flies down and takes the exact image of Tripitaka. Now, Monkey doesn't know which one is the real Tripitaka. And so, he's trying to decide. And he's just about to brain the wrong one when Pigsy laughs and says, I've got a great way to solve this problem. Why don't we tell Master to say the headache spell? And whichever one can correctly say the headache spell, that's the one that's our real master. This is a good plan, because the only person besides Tripitaka who knows the headache spell is Buddha and Kuan Yin Bodhisattva. So the real Tripitaka says the headache spell, and Monkey gets a headache, and the fake Tripitaka jumps up in the air, and the Pigsy chases after, and they fight. Just at that moment arrives the Bodhisattva Manjusri, and he says, hey, thanks for catching my lion for me. It turns out that the magician is his lion, who was sent by Buddha to pay the king back for a mistake that he made once in the past. Karma. And Monkey says, hey, How unfair is it that our obstacles happen to be placed in the way by Buddha? Something fishy here. Keep that in mind for future episodes. Now, I mentioned that I wanted to talk about the tensions between religions. Let's look at the conversation between the prince and Tripitaka when they're in the temple. When Tripitaka doesn't bow to the prince is really angry about this. And he begins to insult Tripitaka and his outfit. Then Tripitaka asks him a question. Your Majesty, to how many things does man, born into the world, owe gratitude? To 4 things, said the prince. To what 4 things? He is grateful, said the prince, to heaven and earth for covering and supporting him, to the sun and moon for shining upon him, to the king for lending him water and earth, and to his father and mother for rearing him. Now listen to that answer. What does that sound like to you? When I think about asking a question and receiving an answer, there's 2 different ways to do it. You can ask a question, the person can think and reflect on it, and then come up with an answer. Or you can ask a question that they already know the answer to. Now he's saying, what is a person grateful to? What should a person be grateful to? And I think of certain traditions that some families have, like for instance, in holidays of Thanksgiving, some families will, everybody go around the table and say something that they're grateful for or thankful for. That doesn't seem to be what the prince is doing here. Rather, the fact that he has a very specific answer with 4 parts sounds like this is a memorized response. It is part of a kind of catechism he has. If anything, that hints at Confucianism and learning and education to me. Not only that, but the 4 parts clearly fit well into these religious philosophies. The first is heaven and earth for covering and supporting him. That's nature. The sun and moon for shining upon him. Again, a natural response. Both of those very connected with all the religious philosophies, but I'm thinking of Taoism particularly. The last 2, the king for lending him water and earth, and father and mother for rearing him. Both of those are about our position in the state and in the family. That sounds very Confucianist. What is my duty towards my king? What is my duty towards my parents? In the prince's case, it's the same. His father is the king, and so the prince both serves as the subject of his father, but also the son of his father. Why is Tripitaka asking this question in the first place? Well, Tripitaka follows it up by laughing, and saying, to the other 3 he owes gratitude indeed, he said, but what need has he of a father and mother to rear him? That's all very well for you, said the prince, who are a shaven-headed, disloyal, food-catching wanderer. But if a man had no father and mother, how could he come into the world? Now this is interesting. Does Tripitaka believe that fathers and mothers don't matter? Well, no. Think back to chapter 9, where his parentage and his duty towards his father and his mother was very, very important to him. So why is he acting like that now? Well, he's trying to stir the prince up, so the prince will be ready to respond to the news that the man he thinks is his father is actually an imposter, and that he will do his duty towards his perished father and avenge him. But did you hear what the prince said to Tripitaka? He called him a shaven-headed, disloyal, food-caging wanderer. That sounds kind of like an insult, doesn't it? But listen to the parts of it. Shaven-headed. Well, because he's a Buddhist. Food-caging, because he begs for food, like a Buddhist. A wanderer, like a Buddhist. The one part of that insult which sticks the most, perhaps, is disloyal. And that ties back into the idea of him not being loyal to his parents. But in what ways might a Buddhist appear disloyal to this Confucianist prince? In the fact that Buddhists believe in detachment, separating yourself from your desires, and therefore achieving enlightenment. The more connections you have with the world, the more you feed those connections, the more suffering you feel. And from the prince's perspective, it seems like a Buddhist is disloyal, because he doesn't engage and care. Sort of a misconception, because that's not really what Buddhism is about, but we feel that tension a little bit between Confucianism and Buddhism in this sequence. Ultimately, Tripitaka is really helping the prince to do his duty, and to complete his role, and ultimately to bring peace and end the suffering of his kingdom, meaning that all religious philosophies are ultimately satisfied here. Thanks for watching. Next time we'll continue the journey with another episode. You can click to watch that, or to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.